Hey there, Arya, and I'm coming back with another video guide on Nokhud, and then we're just gonna jump straight into it. No, I'm on somebody. Alright, well,
I mean, it's probably better to do on the poll,
uh, we'll keep the sound off for now. Alright, so going to this first poll, there are two war spears. Um, keep that in mind. We also had a bit of a hiccup where I was on top of my evoker. I was on his mount, and we accidentally double pulled this. This was not meant to happen. Um, either way though, one thing to keep of note, as a tank, what you want to do is you want to be interrupting one of the, or if you do double pull this, which sometimes you will on Tyrant weeks specifically, I think double pulling this on Fort Week is doable, but a little optimistic because gathering the longbows is a little difficult. But either way, there's a Lancemaster and a Planestomper, both which have Disrupting Shout, so you definitely need to have one melee kick each, or just, assign somebody to kick each. There will be 3 War Spears, very, very dangerous. Also keep that in mind. And then the last thing is the Horn Sounders. Usually speaking, for the Horn Sounders, the very first Horn Sound, or the Rally of the Clan, the cast that they do, the very first one, if you interrupt it within the first, like, 2 seconds of its cast, not only will you stop that initial Rally of the Clan, but you will also stop, um, the Hunt Prey, cast from the Beast Master, that sends the bird to fixate somebody. So you can interrupt 2 things. And then for the next time the Horn Sounder casts, usually I use a Typhoon or a War Stomp. War Stomp is target cap from usually, so normally I'll do like a Typhoon, but ideally I use a Typhoon to kind of group things up. And then obviously be careful of the Lancemaster frontals on your melee. I'm kind of moving in circles nonstop. Not exactly the smartest idea. But as you can tell, these longbows are up for a very long time. And the reason for that is because, they're 2 packs, longbows rarely get grouped. Um, ideally, we kind of drop vortexes and Typhoon knock them in. We do have knocks in this group, a lot of knocks. It's just this wasn't planned, and we rarely kind of do this pull. But as you can tell, I mean, it's definitely still doable. We definitely had some people die on the Lust, losing their cooldowns. So that pull definitely took a lot longer than it should have, but luckily this dungeon isn't about time. All right, so real quick, let me just show you what I meant by the Horn Sounder cast. Give me a sec. So the Horn Sound coincides with the Hunt Prey. A little slow. Right there. Hunt Prey cast from the Beastmaster and the Rally Clan from the Horn Sounder. They both cast at the same time for the most part. The Hunt Prey cast though is a little shorter or faster, I guess, however you want to look at it. So you need to interrupt Rally the Clan. That's the thing you're looking for, and then try to get it early. I missed it there. So the Hunt Prey did get off. So the bird is running at my poor little S Priest. Can be soothed, by the way, if you are a Guardian Druid. Something to note is the Planestompers do not have the frontal cleave. that the Lance Masters do, so you don't have to worry as much about this one. Just gonna fast forward a little bit because these don't matter too much. All right. As far as the war spears go, generally speaking, I drop a vortex initially so that we can just kind of get things rolling. Usually, when people get their damage rolling, things like that, it gets a little easier mid pull. Not only are they, leeching a little bit more, but healer is able to get hots out, whatever it might be. For us, usually it's a disc priest, so able to get some atonements out before these charges go out. So just like one or two GCDs helps them to heal a little bit easier for the war spears. They are very deadly, so keep that in mind. The other thing is there's a little evoker tech where the evoker can get up onto that pole, as you can see on the right side of my screen. And he can also rescue one of our ranged up, and usually we rescue the S Priest up. Then the S Priest grips the healer up, and so they're AFK up there. And what that does is the War Spears cannot actually charge up to them, and so they're constantly sitting there trying to charge the entire time. They will, however, continue to cast Pierce, uh, which is the bleed on the tank. So just something to note, if you want to reset your bleed, then stay away from them. They will not move because they will continue casting the charge. Don't move away too far though. I believe they can charge on you if you move too far. Could be wrong about that. But as you can see, War Spear is AFK, just continuously casting Swift Stab on one of the ranged up there. Can't reach it, so it just sits there and continues to cast. However, it will still pierce you. Pierce takes precedence, so just something to take note of. And I guess the one other thing is make sure you have Incarn for the previous pack. Wherever else you use Incarn in this area doesn't really matter. The order really doesn't matter too much unless you decide to do a slightly different route where you pull the trash pack behind you because there's a bit of RP time on the boss, which I know a lot of groups do, and I think it is the better route. Um, just, you know, it is an option. Okay, so for this boss, usually speaking, you just drop a vortex to help out when the ad is under the boss. What we normally like to do is when the boss hits around 60%ish, on Tyrant or on Fort Weeks, we start CCing the ads with roots, mind controls, just knocks in general. And on Tyrant weeks, we'll usually CC around like 55 to 50%. Um, that allows us to just focus a bit more damage onto the boss, and you know, that that will mean a bit of a faster kill. So you should see soon. Boss is around 60%. We will start CCing. Yeah, right there. The Feral Roots, the ad. And then all the healer is doing is just waiting until the catapult comes off its, timer. And then he presses it. Once the healer presses it, the current ad that is rooted, like that the ad that's fixated on that specific catapult, you can let it go, doesn't matter. You can re-route to elsewhere. So if you're like a Resto Druid or a Feral Druid, you can use your route elsewhere. So you can see the Saboteur is running in, we don't care at all. You can let it go in, doesn't matter. Because if it gets another rotation back to that catapult, we're screwed anyways. So we realistically do not care. And that's pretty much about it for this boss. Fairly straightforward. Generally, I like to keep the boss kind of in the center of the crossroads. Depending on when you have your incarn up on this boss fight, generally you don't want to reuse it again because you want to have incarn up for the next pack, especially for our group because we are low on kicks. Usually we run with a Disc Priest and not a Resto Shaman, so we're actually missing a full kick. And so we always go to this water pack first because we usually have CDs for this. That's what we plan for. And this is where you pop Incarn and you try to blow everything up. The target to kill here is the Storm Speaker, and the reason why is we just don't have enough kicks usually. And we normally let 1 or 2 kicks off. When that does happen, we have that player press defensives. And then at the same time, you as a tank, you should be trying to dodge the arcing blades. It's a frontal. You can dodge it quite easily. Um, just keep that in mind. But the general kick rotation is usually um 2 melee on the big guy, and then everybody else is on the storm caller or storm speaker, I think. I think it's called storm speaker. The storm seeker can be CC'd with anything. Knocks, um, stuns, disorients, spheres, everything. The storm caller cannot be. The named mob cannot be CC'd. And so usually speaking, ideally you have some kind of stun class in your group, a rogue, a DH, shaman, and you'll probably start off with a stun on the storm speaker, or you probably start off with a couple of kicks, like 2 kicks on the storm speaker, and then you do your stuns. That way your kicks come back off cooldown, and then you can interrupt another round again, and then hopefully by then, um, it is dead. I think for our group, what we did was me and the shaman kicked the named mob, and then the other 3 DPS did the Stormseeker. What we usually do is we have the priest only kick summon squall, and then our feral and evoker are rotating and uh kicks and their knocks on the Stormseeker, on the rest of the cast, I guess, whenever they don't have their interrupts up. But, as you can tell, with even 2 melee kicks on the named mob, he will still sometimes get cast off. Uh, just be ready to pop a defensive is all I can really say. It does absolutely fuck, especially on a fort week. It is a guaranteed one shot if you don't pop anything, on a 25, 26. Maybe not a 25 depending on the class, but it definitely does one shot quite a few classes. Alright, now this pull is, a bit of a sus pull. Do not recommend doing this normally, for multiple reasons. Number 1, storm shields do magic damage melee hits, and they hurt a lot. This is the pull where I would normally recommend running Earth Warden, but I have gotten comfortable enough with this pull to where I don't need it. And so I just rotate my defensives inside of Incarn, okay? Even inside of Incarn, I do rotate my defensives. They do hurt that much. And then you can start to kind of kite early. Ideally, you have some slow classes to I guess control the storm shield so they don't run at you. Another thing to note is they do constantly apply the shield on themselves that you definitely want to purge because it's like 25% of their health. One purge you can just think of it as one purge cast is 25% of their health, which is definitely worth doing. So If you have a priest in your group who isn't doing it, they're probably trolling. Right here, I should be targeting the Storm Speaker instead of Name Mob. But the reason why I'm targeting Name Mob is usually I'm kind of like looking out for their health because I know we don't have enough interrupts. Sometimes like I'll delay my kick, um, things like that. But I realistically should be targeting the Storm Seeker, and then having my focus on the named mob because the Storm Seeker should be the first target to die. For low kick comps. If you run with like a Nan Shaman and like, I don't know, a Resto Shaman plus 2 other melee, you'll have no issues with kicks. Or even if you like run with the Rogue, a Rogue can lock down the Storm Speaker with 1 other melee and it'll be sufficient. They can lock down every kick and then you'll have the other 3 kicks on the named mob and that should be plenty. That way you'll have 0 kicks go off. But once again, like I said, this key does have a lot of time on it. So even with a couple of hiccups, you should be fine. Okay, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. So as Arcing Blades, you can just dodge by stepping out, a few yards. As you can see, I just step out a bit. I do get hit often by it, but that's just because I know it doesn't one-shot. It does do a lot of damage, but it doesn't one-shot. So I don't mind too much. Alright, I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. So for this boss, make sure your teammate purges pretty much on cooldown. Try to remind them if possible. Otherwise, the boss does hurt a lot with his melees. Generally speaking, as a tank, you don't usually take too many balls at the start. Um, Ideally, for the first set of balls, your healer tries to get as many as possible. Not even DPS should be taking too many. Uh, and the reason is the first storm, generally speaking, your healer will not have 10 stacks, and so ideally, you still try to you prioritize the balls on their healer so that you can have at least 7 to 8. With the nerf to the boss though, I think like maybe a month ago or something like that, it's not as dangerous anymore. This boss is a lot better, but it is still quite dangerous if your healer is not properly prepared. Right here, I go out of range to collect some balls for just more damage. However, because I went out of melee range, the boss does cast, I think it's like Wind Surge or some shit like that, and it is a huge magic chunk. So just something to take note of. The other thing is, as you can see right there, and let me rewind a little bit. There is an invisible. It's not an invisible wall, but there's a ball right here, kind of going into the middle of the boss. Sometimes the balls are fake, I guess, as in you can't actually pick them up, but they will not trigger the damage when they reach the center of the boss. Aside from that, it's just rinse and repeat. Try to proc your after the wildfire procs during the intermission on your teammates if possible, while also trying to pick up the balls. Just gonna fast forward a little bit because the rest of this boss is pretty simple. There's another boss again where if the boss is low, do not repop Incarn because you definitely want Incarn in the next area. I'm just gonna continue fast forwarding. Alright, in this area, I start off the pull with kind of like a double pull. This area is where usually you get most of your percent, and uh, depending on your route, whether you're skipping the mini bosses at the end or not, this is where it will vary quite a bit on what you pull. Also varies on bolster week because the little dogs and bird will all bolster. And so pulling the beast collar packs, I think it's called beast collar. Um yeah, beast collar. It's in this pack right now. The beast collar packs usually have dogs and birds in them. Um and those are not good for bolster weeks for sure. It's not great percent either, so that's another thing to take note of. And then the other thing is the summoned mobs by the beast callers usually, or they do not drop sanguine, nor do they bolster. Okay, so that's another thing to just keep in mind. Normally, one melee kick is perfectly fine for beast caller interrupts. I think it's called Desecrating Roar. Yeah, it's called Desecrating Roar. That's the cast that summons mobs. You definitely want to kick that because additional mobs mean more melee hits, and those undead mobs can get buffed up by the death speakers, and so it is definitely quite scary when you have, two or even one additional set of little dogs and birds. It gets very, very scary. All right. So now going to this next pack, the warriors. Warriors are probably the most lethal mob for you in this area. Warriors will cast Mortal Strike, which reduces your healing, which is a big part of Guardian Druid's survivability. What you can do is you can kite when you get hit by it, or alternatively, you can stop the cast with a Disorienting Roar or a Typhoon. Either or works. The actual strike itself doesn't do that much damage, but it's more so of that you cannot heal up. Um, it's very hard to heal, I guess, yourself, which Guardian Druid has a lot of self healing from After the Wildfire, Leech, Frenzied Regens. So Mortal Strikes are very deadly. It's just not your regular tank buster. Yep. Hold on, I just changed the aspect ratio by accident. And another thing to note is the birds will always frontal at the tank, so you can kind of like aim them away from your casters. Generally speaking, on Fort Weeks for every single one of these packs, like I said again, the birds and just the undead mobs, they do melee kind of hard. So entering a pack without any Iron First stacks usually means death. And this should apply to like honestly every pack. This isn't just just for Nokhud. But as a Guardian Druid, you always want to get into the habit of always pressing a defensive going into a pull if you have no Iron First stacks. Even if you only have like one Iron First stack, it's still scary. So always practice going to a pull with defensive unless you're chain pulling like I did right there. If you're chain pulling, then it's okay, but still understand how much damage each pack does. As you can see here, I'm still chain pulling, so I'm not too worried, but I still get in the habit of pressing a defensive every single time. And there are still times where I don't press defensives. Maybe you can find some videos of it, and you'll noticeably see me chunk. Um, but the reason why I kind of like chain pulled uh multiple times is number one, we were a little low on time, but number two, Incarn is up. This chain pull I normally always do with Incarn, and so you kind of use Incarn on the previous hill, and then you go and pull the Beastmaster, Beastcaller once some of the undead mobs are dead, or some of the like little lads are dead, specifically the birds. And then afterwards you chain into the next hill when you have Incarn again. Just gonna fast forward again. This hill is also kind of lethal. Um, primarily because the corruptors do hurt a lot. The death bolts are magic damage, and Ironfur doesn't do shit against that, obviously. So that is something just to pay attention to. And then on top of that, you also have a warrior mortal striking you. It is only one warrior, but that makes it so that it's difficult to heal back up the magic damage intake if everything lines up properly. So normally, what I will like to do is I usually stop the mortal strike from the warrior. That way, at least I can heal back up the death bolts. For the name mob here, 2 melee kicks is sufficient. So additional kicks ideally go onto the corruptors on the death bolts. And then after you finish the name mob here, you can trigger the RP. And then while the RP is rolling, we normally pull trash. Once again, this route I don't believe is better. Um, I actually do not like pulling these beast color packs. They're pretty inefficient, in my opinion. It just depends on your group comp. If your group comp has untargeted AoE, then it should be okay. But if you have target cap classes, then pulling those beast color packs are not ideal. Very poor percent um, for how many mobs you're pulling. You would rather pull the pat on the other side. It's a pack of 4, and they patrol. I think it's like 2 corruptors, a warrior, and one of the mystics. All right, just gonna fast forward. An alternative right here also is you can start chaining these into the boss if you feel comfortable. Um, right here for this pull, usually speaking, you won't have Incarn at the start, which is why I kind of pulled the Beast Caller first to just get a few seconds of rage generation on that pack first, and then once my Incarn is almost up, I'll pop defensive, go pull the next pack, and then pop Incarn when it's up. Okay, for this boss on Tyrant Week, very, very scary. Not for you specifically, but for your teammates. Because the Gale Arrow that she casts can one-shot very easily. And so what I normally like to do is, if possible, have my group stack in melee. That way I can proc a after the wildfire heal right after the Gale Arrow, because Tira will always cast one um shot, one of her whatever it's called, quick shots. She'll always cast one quick shot after Gale Arrow, and that can be lethal if it's if that player doesn't use a defensive, or if that player doesn't get spot healed by the healer. And at lower keys, I'm pretty sure the healer is probably not paying attention to who's getting the quick shot on them. So what you can do is you have everybody stack in melee, and then you proc in after the wildfire. But that's only if they play melee. As far as the brutalize goes, it doesn't hurt too much as long as you have like a couple stacks of iron fur. It'll chunk you a little bit. The only times it'll like be very scary is if you're saving rage for the after the wildfire proc. You're about to proc it, but Gale Arrow hasn't come out yet. It always overlaps with the Maruk's tank buster, the Fizz tank buster. And so if that happens and you still want to save the after wildfire proc, then pop a defensive. Generally, I don't have to pop a defensive for any of these brutalizes, but during the Gale Arrows, if you're trying to save, then you definitely do. And the other thing is, as a tank, you definitely want to take a look at where Tira is leaping to before you start moving. There are a couple sets where uh, the fear circle goes out first and then she leaps. Usually it's not like that. I don't know if it's a spell queue thing or whatnot, but that does happen rarely. Um, and when that does happen, sometimes I'll shift in deer form because I do not take wild charge. That time, that was definitely my fault. I should have ran out of the circle, kind of teetered on the edge. Okay. And then we're probably going to finish up the rest of this trash. Give me a second. And then we get 100% before going into the boss room. And we do a skip on the mini bosses. For this pack, by the way, there are again 2 warriors, so make sure you interrupt those. I generally would not recommend pulling this pack with a different pack. I sometimes do it, but when you do a double pull with this pack, again, just keep in mind there are 2 warriors, so even if you have Incarn, you can die because you're not healing as much as you're used to. So the way this skip works, by the way, is whoever your Vanish classes or Shadow Meld tags the mini bosses, you as a tank have to pull the boss immediately right here, and then I pull immediately, so you're second. And then your stealth class will then vanish. And then obviously tell your DPS to not go ham at the start because you're trying to drag it over to the rock. So obviously your only threat is from Moonfire, which is not much at all. And we like to use this rock for melee to have uptime. This boss, the tank busters do hurt a lot. Specifically the bleed in phase 1, and then in phase 2, it's a magic portion. So right here, Running Strike, it applies a bleed for 10 seconds. It does tick quite heavily. On Tyran weeks especially, it ticks very heavily. Always use defensive, and 1 frenzied regen. And your healer does need to heal quite a bit. And then the other thing is for ranged DPS, be careful. This boss has a very fat ass, and the charge can hit you even though you think you're not in range. Even if you're not in melee, still step a few more yards out, because, I don't know, the hitbox is just very weird. If you have an evoker, generally you want your evoker to clear the bleed as you're going into the transition. He usually always leaves you with the bleed going in the transition. In the intermission, we have assigned knocks and kicks. Our evoker usually gets the right side, he knocks and then interrupts that far one. Our feral knocks the left side and then interrupts the left one. Our S-Priest gets close left and then I get close right. Aggro can be a bitch on this, so something to keep note of. Usually speaking, I will drop a Vortex and then I'll knock, and then my Feral does 2 more knocks, and then my Evoker does oh no, my Feral does Disorienting Roar, not 2 more knocks. And then my Evoker does 1 knock plus Landslide, which stuns them. However, we had a Resto Shaman this time around, so capped out him, easy peasy. And then you'll see us again just use the rock tech. Our Feral was able to stealth it, so doesn't need it. Doesn't need to go beyond the rock that time. And then right here, after every single circle kind of thing, you'll have a crackling upheaval. And these puddles, ideally you drop them on the edges. Doesn't need to be perfectly on the edge. You also don't want to go too far away from the boss because he will target somebody randomly and then do the cone. You can very easily die if you don't have a movement, some kind of movement buff. And then as far as DPS goes, always, always, always use a defensive on that spear. It does one shot on a high enough key level. Very, very lethal. We actually have our priests usually use a power word shield on the target as well. On Tyrant Week specifically. If you do have Incarn in the second phase, which I normally do because I pop it once in the first phase, and it takes care of usually 2 bleeds. In the second phase, you pop Incarn again, and it's perfectly fine as a defensive. I don't believe you can get one shot even on Tyrant Weeks with it. And that's about it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.